China's new leadership will have to face an enormous demographic challenge soon. We ask, how will the new leaders deal with this inevitable challenge? And what are the factors making life difficult for elderly people around the world? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tony Harris. One issue facing the next set of leaders in China is an aging population. There are 178 million people over the age of 60. That number is expected to grow to 480 million by 2050, with the elderly making up 1/3 of the population. But China's one-child policy means not enough babies are being born to support the aging population. The average pension in the country's rural areas is less than $9 a month, but in urban areas it can reach $247. Laura Kyle has our report.
Lang Chongsheng has just had his 89th birthday in a hospice in Beijing. He'd never been in hospital before now, but his only son put him here when he moved to America. Lang is waiting for his US visa to arrive, but it probably never will.
To be really honest, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be with my son. I really miss them, but there's nothing I can do but try and cope.
China is a rapidly aging society. 12 years ago, there were 6 workers for every retiree. By 2030, there'll be just 2. For generations, elderly Chinese have been looked after by their children at home. The one-child policy is breaking that tradition, with the burden of care being too great for young adults to handle on their own. Increasing numbers of elderly parents are now being left in places like this. Head nurse Yuan Jie says the hardest part of her job is getting patients to understand why their children have sent them here. She works in one of Beijing's largest hospices. It's a relatively new concept in China, and she's never had any formal training.
There's no training from the government. We train ourselves. The most important qualities our employees should have are kindness and responsibility.
71-year-old Wang Changling lives with her son. Every day she meets her friends for this tree-slapping workout, which she says helps her stay healthy. She gets a pension, and last year the government paid to remove a cancerous tumour. But she still worries about becoming a burden.
It's better that I'm with my family. It makes me feel warm. But once I can't move, I will think about going to the home so I don't burden the children.
For many already in hospices, the nurses are now their family. China's changing modern society has left these people behind. Laura Kyle for Inside Story, Beijing.
So how will China and other countries deal with this inevitable challenge of an aging population? To answer this question, we're joined by our guest in Hong Kong, Andrew Leung. Mr. Leung is an economist and political commentator. He is also a former Hong Kong government representative to the United Kingdom. In Oxford, Hafiz Khan is a senior lecturer in applied statistics. Mr. Khan is also a visiting research fellow at the Oxford Institute of Population Aging at the University of Oxford. And in Shanghai on Skype is Yong, a fellow at the Carolina Population Center at the University of North Carolina. Welcome to you all. Gentlemen, can I have you reflect on a piece that we've run just a moment ago from Laura Kyle? And the piece is about this sense that more and more we are seeing the traditional Chinese ideal of caring for your parents coming under growing pressure in China. Andrew Leung, let me start with you. How significant a shift is that for a Chinese society?
Well, the significance is in economic terms. We are seeing the emergence of a so-called 4-to-1 phenomenon. 4 meaning the one being the one single child. As he grows up, or as he or she grows up, both members of the spouse will have to take care of 2 of each of their parents, and of course sometimes even their grandparents. So you have about one single person taking care of 2 parents and then 4 grandparents. So that's a so-called 4-to-1 phenomenon. This places immense burden on the single child grown up. So that's the economic terms. But in terms of the law, China has enacted the law forbidding the abandonment of the support of the parents. But of course, there are lots of other ways to get around with that.
Sure.
So this is a huge social problem. For China.
But Hafiz Khan, the reality is that it is increasingly, it seems, a burden on these young people to take care of, particularly if we're talking about the 4-2-1 phenomenon, parents and grandparents. What's the way forward here?
Actually, what we see, we live in a society where we have 4 generations living at the same time, and the more burdens are coming to younger generations. So if we look back and we see 14, 4, 2, 1, it's a tremendous burden is coming up for the new generation. They have to look after them, they have to contact them, and this sort of is a social and as well as economic issue is associated with sort of responsibilities for the younger generation. Yes, I think this debate is going on for different countries, and China is heavily affected because of their one-child policy.
Yeah.
Although the government has introduced and revised the policy in May last year to allow them to go for 2-child policy. I think China is rightly understand there is a tremendous impact of one-child policy, and there are a lot of controversy about this policy, but I think the policymakers rightly understand about this impact of on the aging society.
Yeah, Yong, if I could ask you, maybe a lot of debate about the one-child policy in China, but how would you characterize that debate? Is that debate going to lead to a solution in the near future?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And yes, for a long time, at least for more than a decade, people in China have debating about what to do with this policy. We, as the previous 2 participants have said in this conversation, this policy has created that's from demographic side, it's very clear. But from the political side, this policy was made for the purpose of economic development. Remember, when China announced this policy, its main purpose was to control its population. So the Communist Party has been sort of struggling to try to maintain the policy, its own legitimacy in a way to keep it. And so they have been reluctant to change it in a fear of this could change, all the other
Sure.
things. But as the recent census has revealed, China is indeed already an aging society, although China's economy has developed very fast. Its aging process is actually developing even more faster. Part of that is this one-child policy. It
Sure.
created those 4-to-1 families.
So, but Andrew Leung, isn't it clear at this point that the one-child policy, it just has to go? The demographics make that policy just unsustainable moving forward?
Well, in fact, the one-child policy has been a little modified.
Sure.
In the sense that at the moment, if both members of the family are born single child, then both of them could be allowed to have more than one child. And then there is an exemption for minorities. For example, in Xinjiang, in Tibet, all the minority groups are totally exempt from the one-child policy. So you have the leader of the Xinjiang separatist movement, who is now in America. I mean, she's got 8 children. So there was some modification there, but overall, there's still a time bomb. But of course, the one-child policy was created by mandate, by the stroke of a pen. And likewise, it could be undone by the stroke of a pen. But on the other hand, there is a long demographic kind of break time. So even if you change the policy now, the impact would be felt maybe a few decades later.
Well, that's interesting, Andrew. Let me get Hafiz Khan in on this.
Yeah.
Hafiz Khan, is there any real evidence that if the policy were lifted today, that the Chinese would indeed have more children?
Well, I think this policy they introduced in 1978, although that implemented for the first child of 1979, that has tremendous impact by now. But this government has realized this actually and tried to change it. What happens actually, that decision was political at that time. Although we have now experienced actually the demographic decline, the demographic transition happened because of higher education, women empowerment, lots of other things, not only the family planning. There are countries they achieve demographic transitions without family planning and without introducing one-child policy. If we look back at Germany, they do not have a one-child policy, although they are actually their fertility is below replacement. And if you look at the Western country, or Western Europe, they have the below fertility for a long time without effective family planning program. So I think this government, the Chinese government, introduced that in a political point of view in order to solve this population problem. Now they realized it, they are revising it, and it will take a few decades to recover the whole thing. I agree with other two speakers.
So, Yong, it sounds like even if the policy were eliminated, we're not looking at a new baby boom that would effectively sort of balance out the population needs for the support of older people in the society for decades to come.
Certainly, changing the policy, the hope would be we will at least see some increase of fertility. Mm-hmm. But if we look around the world in neighboring countries of China and look inside China, I'm afraid this policy change might be coming too late. We have been conducting a study in Jiangsu province, that's a more developed province in China, just north of Shanghai. And we have been following 3,000 women who were allowed to have a second child by this policy exemptions because one side of the couple is a single child. So by this policy, they could have a second child. In 3 years, only 10% of them had a second child. So this rate of having second child is very low. And second, if we look at Taiwan, Taiwan is probably 10, 20 years ahead of China in terms of economic development. And Taiwan does not have a one-child policy. Taiwan's fertility right now is 1. It's lowest in the world. So given China's speed of moving towards, in terms of economic development and all the other things, urbanization, women's education, and I'm not optimistic about this rebound of fertility.
Let's take a closer look at this issue. In October, the UN urged countries to address the needs of aging populations. Let's look at some of the key findings of the report. The aging phenomenon, for example, is happening faster in poorer countries. By 2050, 4 out of 5 elderly people will be in developing nations. Right now, only Japan has more than 30% of its population over 60 years old. But by 2050, there will be more than 60 countries with the same demographic. The report also says that 47% of the world's older men and 24% of older women are still in the labor force, but only 1/3 of countries have comprehensive social protection schemes. Now, this UN report is being released 10 years after aging was first discussed within the context of human rights. The Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging is the only global agreement for improving older people's lives. Let's take a look at some of its recommendations. Governments should fight any kind of discrimination against older people. The elderly should be able to work for as long as they want. They should have the same access to preventive and curative care, as well as rehabilitation as other age groups. Older people should also have access to decent housing, receive support if they are caregivers, and be free from neglect, abuse, and violence. Andrew Leung, let me come to you first on this. What is it? Are there countries around the world who are taking a proactive approach to managing their elderly populations that come to mind for you?
Well, I think Japan is the first that comes to mind. Japan has a very, very comprehensive scheme to take care of its elderly population. But the point to bear in mind is that the ability to take care of the aged is dependent on the size and the stage of development of the economy. It's one thing for advanced countries like Japan to be able to do this. It's quite another for emerging economies when their economic foundation is not fully laid and they are facing an increasing proportion of the aged. That could be a problem. Now, the previous speakers and yourself highlighted the fact that even if China sort of relinquished the one-child policy, is unlikely to immediately lead to a tremendous growth in population. This could be true to a certain extent, in the sense that, for example, in the cities, where the middle class is rising, then economics, as someone said, is the best contraceptive because it's very expensive to raise the children and to send them to university. So that alone would act as a barrier against further population growth. But if you take it to the countryside, where the poor farmers, they've got nothing else no jobs, and all they have is their land or the part of the land, so they need more hands to support themselves. So that's why China is very wary of relaxing the policy at this stage before the so-called middle income society is fully in place by 2020 at the earliest.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, the policy has been relaxed a little bit, and there's more support for the elderly overall compared with previous decades.
Yeah, Hafiz Khan, I've read somewhere it was suggested that China is simply aging faster than it is getting rich. Are there other nations that come to mind for you that are tackling this issue of aging? It's a big problem globally as we expand and extend the conversation. Other countries that come to mind for you that are doing a pretty good job at proactively addressing this issue?
Actually, this is a global phenomenon. Although China has more than 100 million people over age 60 years, and this population is more than entire Europe population, 60+ population. So I think every country is facing these challenges in different terms. I think this UN report indicates everything clearly and which dimensions we should go for, and made useful suggestions. I worked in Bangladesh and other developing countries for a long time to give them support and what sort of model we should introduce for developing countries without government subsidies and help. China has very good planning and policy for the urban population, but if you go to the rural China, where vast majority of people still live below the poverty level or live just as a medium family, they are still dependent on their care, on their family still. So this traditional piety still continues in rural China, where most elderly people are dependent on their family members.
Sure. Well, Yong Kai, look, it seems to me if you've got an aging population and you don't have enough young people in the system to spread the cost around, I'm wondering if China might ever consider allowing immigrants into the country, more immigrants into the country, and have them pay into the pension schemes.
I think that's a good suggestion. But practically, in my view, it simply won't work. China, in terms of population controlling of inflow population, China probably has more relaxed policy than many other countries. This is purely based on my own experience going through border control in the United States. It's quite tight, and coming to China, it's very easy. They ask you a simple question and they let you in. And that's first observation. Second, China is such a large country. It has a 1.3 billion population. Most of other countries, even the Chinese government let everyone in, it probably won't solve this kind of problem. And third one is, in a way, it's already happening. If you go to the Chinese city of Guangdong, there are many Africans coming into China for trade, and now getting married and having children in that area. It's sort of there are some local discussion treated it as if it's a problem.
Yeah.
And also in the bordering area of between China and Vietnam, China and Burma, the cross-border marriage is quite frequent.
Okay,
but overall, I don't think it will solve China's labor problem or marriage market problem.
Well, Andrew Leung, then moving forward, one of the things for China maybe to consider is what other countries are considering. What about raising the retirement age, reducing some of the pension benefits, while at the same time improving health care for older people so that they can, in fact, work longer?
Well, that's all happening. I mean, definitely healthcare has been improving, and pension benefits have been gradually increased. And of course, there is the Chinese culture, even though diluted recently, of the children supporting their parents, still very ingrained in China's Confucianism. But one point I would like to point out is that the other side of the coin is the so-called Louis turning curve. This is a curve whereby the country's excess labor has become more and more limited because the years of urbanization and industrialization are beginning to exhaust China's cheap labor supply. So you're talking about importation of labor. I don't think that this would happen on a big scale. That's one thing China doesn't lack, is the number of heads, head counts. But I think that a lot of the labor-intensive activities and operations are increasingly being outsourced elsewhere. As you can see, the factories, some of the cheap operations are being moved to further inland or outside China. So I think that this is a turning point whereby the China's society is moving towards more high value added and less dependent on labor. But no doubt, the aging population, the care of the aged remains a very, very huge problem for China.
Hafiz Khan, a thought from you, and maybe we'll have enough time to get a thought from each of our guests here. Do we look at this issue of aging as a problem or as a gift? After all, we're all on this panel, we're all aging, and as we sit here, we clearly have, I would think, things that we can offer to our various societies. Do we look at this enough as a gift as opposed to a challenge? And if we did, would we aggressively tackle this?
I think this is a trump of development. We are fortunate that we get this benefit in this century. So this is 21st century is a gift. And given all these aging issues, I think we need to readjust things, we need to redevelop, we need to scientifically manage the whole issue. This is an opportunity for us. It gives us lots of opportunity to think and reshape our models. I think the Oxford Institute of Aging is doing the research on global aging issues, and they have got the experience of developing developed countries and what is the best model we should do and what should be the cost-effective way to give the support for elderly people. I think it's a fantastic place to work, and I think we are doing it in China, in the rural China, doing it in Bangladesh, and sharing the ideas, and sometimes some of the models are complementary to each other. And China's experience is amazing because China is now opening up because they are changing their one-child policy, they are expanding their economy around the world.
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity for China to, they're also understanding how to care their elderly people.
Hafiz Khan,
and this...
I'm sorry, I have to jump in. I think I want to leave it there with this as an opportunity. Thank you, and thanks to all of our guests in Hong Kong, Andrew Leung, in Oxford, Hafiz Khan, and in Shanghai on Skype, Yong. And thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Inside Story. Feel free to send us your feedback. Just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.